Have you ever noticed how quickly we grow numb to holy things and call it maturity instead of what it truly is? Forgetfulness. How our souls, once tender to the weight of sacred truths, become dulled by repetition and familiarity. How the cross, the very emblem of the universe's turning, has been softened into ornamentation, a decorative charm to wear around our necks, a sticker to adorn our devices, a symbol painted on walls of buildings we rarely enter with more than casual eyes. And yet, long before it became something to glance at absent-mindedly, before it was repurposed into aesthetic, it was an instrument of unimaginable terror. Rough, splintered timber soaked with the blood of the only man who ever lived without sin, a man whose every word carried weight, whose every touch healed and renewed, whose every step bore the glory of heaven. And I want you to pause here and dare to imagine, not just with your mind, but with your spirit, the hands that once lifted children from the dust, that once brushed away the shame of the marginalized, that once wrote letters of truth in the sand, now stretched wide, pinned mercilessly to lumber, not because weakness compelled him, not because power abandoned him, but because love compelled him, love so vast and relentless that the agony of body was eclipsed by the ache for our redemption. Jesus Christ did not remain on that cross because nails were strong, nor because the world had no authority to remove him. He stayed because his affection for you, for me, for every wandering heart, was stronger than his desire to escape pain, stronger than the instinct to self-preserve, stronger than the call of comfort or safety. And this is no sentimental sermon, no soft allegory for our quiet contemplation. It is a warning and a challenge. For if he, in his infinite obedience and compassion, carried that cross willingly, what excuse will we offer when he asks us to carry ours, when he asks us to walk paths of hardship that are not adorned in glory or applause, when he asks us to surrender comforts that we have mistaken for blessings? Many admire him from afar, admire his courage, his wisdom, his miracles, yet refuse to follow where following is costly. We sing songs of sacrifice in our comfortable chairs while clinging to every cushion of ease. We claim love for him while recoiling at the thought of true surrender. The cross was never meant to be stared at like a museum piece, a relic to evoke sentimentality or polite devotion. It demands movement, action. It demands that we step forward until the shadow of it falls upon our shoulders, and then, and only then, does the journey begin. Then we begin to live as he lived, to love where it costs, to forgive where it aches, to turn away from applause when it threatens obedience, to find joy not in recognition but in alignment with the heart of God, to walk through days not asking why the path is hard but asking how to walk it faithfully, to bear burdens not as punishment but as participation in the shaping of a Christ-like soul. To be a disciple is not to comprehend fully, it is to obey consistently, even trembling, even confused, even with tears that blur the vision and weigh down the spirit. For understanding is no prerequisite for obedience, and yet obedience is the only door through which understanding will eventually enter. When he says, take up your cross, he is not prescribing a random endurance of suffering. He is offering something infinitely greater, a fellowship with the divine, an invitation into holy companionship, an opportunity to be shaped by the same love that held the universe together and then spilled itself into a rugged, bloody tree. Step by step, we crucify pride, bear it, ego, break with the world, and its empty praise. We exchange shallow comforts for the deep and abiding presence of Christ. This is not a metaphor. It is the call of life. Morning prayer is not just a ritual. It is a surrender, a daily handing over of the self to the one who bore everything for us. Lord Jesus, may this day I carry what you ask me to carry. May I bear it not in bitterness, not in resentment, not in passive endurance, but in awe, in reverence, in an awakened heart that finally recognizes the cost of love and the power of obedience. Let your sacrifice penetrate through my cold routines, break through the hardened places in my heart. Ignite within me a fire that refuses to be satisfied with politeness or superficial devotion. I no longer desire a faith that is measured, controlled, or neat. I desire a faith that burns, that consumes, that transforms, one worthy of the one who refused to descend from that cross, because his love for me, for all of us, compelled him to remain, one that compels me to lay down what I cling to for the sake of him who laid down everything for me. This day and every day, may my life reflect the magnitude of that love. May my hands reach to heal. May my voice speak truth. May my feet walk paths of sacrifice. May my heart expand in mercy and humility. May I love where it costs, forgive where it hurts, serve where it is inconvenient, and surrender where it is frightening. May I see the world as he sees it, not with the eyes of the comfortable, but with the heart of the crucified. And in doing so, may I find not emptiness but fullness, not loss but gain, not despair but an unshakable hope. For to follow him is to discover that every cross borne in faith, every burden embraced with love, every surrender given in obedience is not weight but wings, not suffering but transformation, not a stumbling stone but the pathway to the heart of God. This is morning prayer. This is holy surrender. This is life lived in the light of the cross. And may I never grow numb again. May I never mistake forgetfulness for maturity. May I live awake, alive, burning with a love worthy of the one who stayed, who bore, who gave all for me. What if the most dangerous threat to your soul is not the dramatic storms of sin that batter the gates of your heart, the obvious temptations and moral failures that we often fear, but something far subtler, something quieter, something that seeps into your life while you sleep and calls it rest? What if comfort, the gentle lullaby of yours, is the enemy that erodes your that numbs your spiritual senses, that disguises complacency as wisdom and contentment as faith. Jesus never promised his disciples convenience. He never told them that following him would be tidy or simple. He never guaranteed that the road would be lined with admiration or applause. He promised a cross, an instrument of suffering, a call to daily surrender, a burden heavy enough to force dependence on him and teach the soul what it means to be truly alive. Luke declared with no ambiguity that whoever does not carry his own cross and follow him cannot be his disciple. And this command is not cruel. It is not arbitrary. It is not an abstract metaphor designed to make us feel guilty. It is love in its most dangerous, transformative form. For love without cost is merely sentiment. It is soft and empty. A polite nod rather than a burning fire. It is a love that entertains rather than transforms. And it makes me wonder, have we, in the comfort of our modern Christianity, become too polite, too well-mannered to be moved? Have we cultivated a faith that applauds from the sidelines but never risks the pain of obedience? We attend church faithfully, yet avoid conviction. We sing hymns with enthusiasm, yet refuse to let them pierce the routines and habits that define our lives. We cheer for preachers and teachers whose words resonate briefly in our ears, yet do not echo in the chambers of our hearts where change is born. We admire the cross from a distance, gazing at it as if it were an art piece rather than a call to action. So I must ask you, when was the last time your faith truly cost you something? When was the last time following Christ made you less popular, less comfortable, less safe? When did obedience make you hesitate, tremble, or weep because it demanded you leave behind something you loved? Because if your faith has never required sacrifice, perhaps you are not yet a disciple. Perhaps you are merely a spectator, a distant admirer of the cross while keeping your life comfortably insulated from its demands. Today I want to invite you into something deeper. A Christianity that is not convenient, but consecrated. A life where surrender is not an event, but a lifestyle. Where taking up your cross is not a Sunday sermon moment, but a daily reality. Where every decision is weighed against the cost of love, the price of obedience, the stakes of eternity. Do you dare to live such a life? Are you willing to carry what Christ places upon your shoulders, not only when it is inspiring, not only when it is celebrated, not only when it draws admiration or applause, but when it is inconvenient, when it is uncomfortable, when it demands risk and tears and perseverance? If your heart longs for this kind of devotion, if you feel the Spirit tugging at the edges of your complacency, I want you to whisper to heaven. Before you type to earth, let your spirit speak first. Say simply, Lord, I am willing, and then make your declaration. Comment below with the words, I am ready, or even just the number 1, and know that this simple act is far more than symbolic. It is a declaration, a stake in the ground, proof that you refuse to hide behind polite faith any longer. proof that you are choosing obedience over convenience, surrender over slumber, that you are willing to be refined, reshaped, and set ablaze by the one who endured unspeakable agony so that you might know glory. Your voice matters more than you know. It tells the enemy that your comfort is no longer your God, that your cross is no longer optional, that your life, starting at this moment, is willing to bear the weight of eternal things. This is not a call to impulsive action. It is not a challenge to show off courage. It is an invitation to participate in the sacred rhythm of surrender, to align your will with the one whose love was so deep that it could not turn away from suffering for your sake. Each time you say yes to the small, daily crosses, each time you refuse the temptation to retreat into safety, each time you choose love over convenience, forgiveness over pride, humility over recognition, you are stepping into the mystery of God's transformative work. For a life of true discipleship is measured not by comfort retained, but by sacrifice embraced, not by applause received, but by obedience rendered faithfully in unseen moments. It is the quiet decisions in homes, workplaces, and relationships that define the depth of your surrender. It is in those moments that your soul is tested, stretched, and made strong. You are called not to admire the cross, not to speak about its beauty in abstract terms, not to measure your spirituality by attendance or outward piety, but to carry it, shoulder it. Let it mark the rhythm of your days. Let it shape your priorities, your words, your actions. Let it burn away indifference, entitlement, and distraction. Let it teach you that true love costs, true faith demands, true obedience transforms. And if you have never felt the discomfort of sacrifice, the weight of obedience, the tension between desire and duty, then your faith is still in its infancy. Your soul is still insulated from the refining fire that produces spiritual maturity. Do not settle for a polite, painless Christianity. Do not allow the world's comforts to lull you into spiritual sleep. Awaken now to the reality that God calls you into a life that matters eternally, a life that is alive to the stakes of glory, a life where each yes, each sacrifice, each act of surrender contributes to the shaping of a soul that will endure beyond time. So I ask you again, if you are ready to step out of the audience and onto the stage of obedience, to take up your cross fully and without reservation, if you are ready to let heaven know that your comfort is no longer your God, that your cross is no longer optional, that your life will carry weight from this moment forward, then type "I am ready" or simply the number 1, and let that act, small as it may seem, echo in the spiritual realms as a testimony of your willingness, as a statement that your faith is no longer polite but powerful, no longer passive but participatory, no longer safe but sanctified. Let it mark the day when your devotion moved from admiration to action, from thought to obedience, from comfort to consecration. Let it signal a journey where every burden carried in love becomes a badge of eternal significance. Every act of surrender a step closer to the heart of God. Every cross embraced a declaration that you are no longer content to sleep while eternity stirs. Every whisper of willingness, a flame against the darkness. And may your life, marked by this choice, be a living testimony that Christ's cross is not a relic to admire, but a reality to bear, not a symbol to decorate, but a weight to carry, not a story to hear, but a life to live, beginning now, in this moment, in the simple act of saying, I am ready, in the resolve that from this day forward, your faith will cost something, your obedience will stretch you, your love will challenge you, your surrender will define you, and in that willingness, you join a line of disciples whose devotion will echo through eternity, whose lives, once ordinary, are transformed into testimonies of power, grace, and relentless love, who now choose to carry their cross, not for recognition, not for comfort, but for the one who carried the greatest cross of all, the cross that bore the weight of the world so that you might rise, so that your eternity might be secured, so that your soul might awaken, and your voice, typed humbly in the comments section or whispered to heaven, becomes part of this sacred symphony of obedience, a statement that your comfort will no longer control you, that your life is willing to bear the eternal weight of love, and that you have decided, finally, to be fully alive in Christ. To carry your cross is not to seek pain, not to chase suffering as if agony itself were a virtue, but to surrender power, to let go of the subtle tyrant that rules so many of our lives, the inner self that constantly demands comfort, applause, and control, that whispers to us that our way is best, that our preferences are paramount, that our reputation must be guarded at all costs. Jesus does not ask you to pursue suffering for its own sake. He asks you to die to that quieter self, to crucify the ego that clings to privilege, to dismantle the fortress of pride, to lay down the throne of superiority that tempts you to compare, judge, and dominate. Remember, the Son of God walked willingly toward Golgotha not because he adored pain or sought humiliation. He walked because he loved obedience. He knew that love and obedience are inseparable, that the truest expression of the heart is not comfort or convenience, but surrender. And what if the greatest battle of your life is not against the storms and slings of the world, but against what you refuse to lay down at His feet, the hidden sins, the self-centered habits, the subtle need to control outcomes, your temper that flares when challenged, your pride that refuses correction, your secret superiority that looks down on others even in quiet moments. These are not small flaws. They are formidable enemies of holiness, enemies cloaked in the guise of personality or temperament, and the call of Christ is not merely improvement, not better manners, not moral tidying, but crucifixion, a dying of self, a surrender so radical that it reorders your desires, reshapes your ambitions, and liberates your spirit. He who said, "Follow me," did not intend for you to walk behind him at a respectable distance, to nod politely at his commands while holding tightly to your comforts. He meant, where I died, live in the surrender that I live. Allow your ambitions, the goals that once ruled your calendar and conversations, to collapse under the weight of obedience. Let the opinions of others fall silent compared to the only verdict that matters, the voice of your Savior saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." This is not extremism. It is sacred realism. It is the acknowledgement that transformation cannot happen without being undone first. You cannot experience resurrection without first experiencing death. Some pray for revival, for joy, for destiny, yet cling desperately to what the Spirit must remove. They want breakthrough, yet resist discipline. They want blessing, yet refuse purification. They hope for miracles, yet hoard control. The cross interrupts such half-hearted attempts at faith with a single uncompromising truth. You do not truly believe until you truly obey. So today, examine carefully what still holds the throne of your heart. If it is success, tear it down. If it is comfort, expose it. If it is control, release it. These are not suggestions. They are invitations into the work of God in your soul. The world applauds self-preservation. It teaches compromise and careful calculation. Christ crowns self-denial. He honors surrender. He calls you to carry your cross daily. Not once in dramatic moments, not occasionally when convenient, but persistently, consistently, moment by moment. In that daily dying, something miraculous happens. The more you surrender, the more fully you live. The heavier the cross feels in your hands, and yet the lighter your soul becomes. For it is paradoxical but true that release brings freedom, letting go brings life, crucifixion produces resurrection, obedience cultivate joy, and the kingdom operates on laws that invert the world's understanding of gain and loss. The cross is the school of this wisdom, the place where ambition is broken so that humility can bloom, where ego is silenced so that love can speak, where control is relinquished so that trust can rule. Each act of surrender, each moment of letting go, is a seed planted in the soil of eternity, a step toward alignment with the heart of God. So do not wait for dramatic trials to carry your cross. Do not mistake fleeting discomfort for the work of the Spirit. Rather, in the quiet moments, in the small choices, in the daily dying of self, embrace the cross again. Allow it to shape you, to teach you, to purify you. Let your thoughts, your desire, your plans, your habits, and your ambitions all bow before it. And in that yielding, discover the paradox of divine living, that the heavier the burden seen, the more your soul soars, the deeper the obedience, the greater the freedom, the more radical the surrender, the more profound the life. This is the secret of the kingdom. The hidden principle that turns death into life, loss into gain, suffering into glory. Do not shrink from it. Do not rationalize a polite Christianity that never costs. Do not adorn your faith with neat platitudes while keeping your heart insulated from obedience. The call is real. The cross is real. The work of transformation is real. So step forward. Take it up. Surrender once again the comforts that distract, the pride that blinds, the ambitions that enslave, and walk in the sacred rhythm of dying to self. For in that rhythm, in that daily crucifixion, your life is aligned with eternity. Your spirit strengthened, your love deepened, your faith awakened, and your soul, once burdened by the quiet tyrant of self, is liberated to live fully, abundantly, radically. And that is the true power, the true secret, the true beauty of carrying your cross, not seeking pain, not chasing martyrdom, but surrendering fully, consistently, and daily, so that Christ, the author and perfecter of your faith, may be glorified, your life transformed, and the kingdom manifested through you. Jesus once said that many will call him Lord, yet refuse to do what he commands. And this warning cuts to the heart of the quiet danger in modern Christianity, the tendency to speak faith as if it were a badge to wear rather than a battle to fight. I have met believers who parade their devotion, who can quote scripture fluently, who attend every service, who seem outwardly faithful, and yet when the questions of obedience, sacrifice, and true surrender arise, they shrink back, they hedge, they whisper perhaps later. The Apostle Paul, in his wisdom and boldness, pleaded with the believers in Rome to present their bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. And this was no poetic flourish, no lofty metaphor. It was a war cry, a call to arms in the spiritual battlefield. He understood that true worship does not reside in stained glass moments, in the emotional peaks of Sunday mornings, or the eloquence of polished prayers. It lives in the mundane, the ordinary, the daily decisions to obey when it hurts, when it costs, when it challenges the self and exposes the ego. I once spoke with a young believer who confessed that he longed for a deeper spiritual life, who prayed for intimacy with God, yet immediately added a caveat: not if it costs my ambition, not if it interferes with my plans. And I watched over months as his prayers became impressive, his devotional language elevated, his posts and testimonies inspiring, yet the very obedience that God requires quietly eroded. It disappeared as he clung to comfort, to approval, to security. Does this sound familiar to you? Have you ever felt your lips saying yes to Christ, while your heart whispered maybe later? Perhaps in a moment of quiet reflection or a secret temptation. That is the silent danger of modern faith. It decorates the altar of God with beautiful words, polished expressions, eloquent confessions, and yet refuses to place anything real upon it. The invitation of Christ remains fierce and tender, uncompromising and intimate. He does not seek your applause. He does not need your admiration. He wants your allegiance, your surrender, your willingness to obey even when obedience costs. The cross is not an ornament. It is a summons, a call to die to self, to relinquish pride, bitterness, and fear. So let us be honest today. When was the last time your faith required you to let go of something precious? A habit that comforts, a dream that dazzles, a routine that numbs. If you struggle to answer, perhaps you have been avoiding the very path that leads to life, the road that demands daily sacrifice and wholehearted obedience. The Lord is not asking you to impress Him with eloquence, ritual, or outward perfection. He is asking you to trust Him, to let go of control, to surrender your agenda and ambitions, to hand over your fears, to lay down the grudges and bitterness that secretly rule. Trust Him enough to follow when it hurts, when it confuses, when it demands courage beyond what you thought you had. For it is in those moments, the painful, inconvenient, costly moments, that heaven leans close, that the Spirit whispers, that obedience becomes worship. And this is not theoretical, this is lived reality. My friend, I once met a woman who had grown up in church, yet had never truly obeyed Christ in any area of risk. Her faith had been polite, measured, cautious. She attended services faithfully. She smiled. She sang. She prayed. Yet when confronted with the need to forgive a lifelong offender, to sacrifice comfort for service, to risk reputation for righteousness, she hesitated. She rationalized. She retreated. And I realized that for many, this is the pattern: a faith that admires from a distance, a devotion that applauds the cross without ever lifting a finger to carry it. So if these words echo in your heart, if you feel a stirring, a tension, a longing to move beyond polite faith into the arena of true obedience, I want to know you are here. I want you to make a declaration that your heart is alive. Comment below, "I am listening." Or even simply type the number 2. For this small act is more than symbolic. It signals that you are awake, that your soul hungers for a faith that costs yet transforms. It tells me, and perhaps more importantly, it tells your own heart that you are willing to take the first step. The smallest act of public agreement can ignite a private revolution. It can become the hinge upon which obedience swings, the starting point for a deeper walk with God. The moment when words begin to align with deeds, when lips stop betraying the heart, when faith becomes real, tangible, and alive. I want to encourage you not to shrink from this invitation, not to rationalize comfort, not to postpone obedience. For every hesitation feeds the polite faith that decorates the altar without surrendering anything. Every delay allows fear, pride, and selfishness to claim dominion. Yet when you choose to act, even in a small way, even by typing a number, even by whispering a prayer, you step into a rhythm that transforms, that aligns your will with the heart of God, that moves you from admiration to action, From theoretical devotion to authentic discipleship, the cross, which is not a symbol to admire but a call to obey, becomes your teacher, your sculptor, your path to life. It reminds you that worship is not the emotion of a Sunday morning, but the courage to obey when obedience is costly, when following Christ conflicts with your desires, when walking his path requires sacrifice. It is in that daily, often hidden, choosing to obey that transformation occurs, that character is forged, that holiness is cultivated, that your faith moves from polite observation to passionate engagement. So let this be the moment you acknowledge what still holds sway over your heart, whatever it is: pride, fear, ambition, comfort. Let it fall before him. Lay it at the cross. And then take the next step, the small act of declaring publicly that you are listening, that you are present, that your heart is awake, your soul is stirring, and your faith will no longer be superficial. For the first step, however small, leads to the second, then the third. And soon obedience ceases to be a task and becomes life itself, the life that Jesus came to give: abundant, transformative, eternal. Your response matters, not only to me, but to the work God is doing in your soul. It matters to your own trajectory of faith, for in agreeing, in acknowledging, in declaring, you take hold of the reality that following Christ is costly, yet the cost is the gateway to freedom. The surrender is the secret to joy, and obedience is the path to intimacy with the one who calls you beyond admiration to allegiance, beyond comfort to cross-bearing, beyond polite devotion to passionate, transforming faith. So will you take that step? Will you type, "I am listening"? Will you type the number 2? Will you let your heart, your lips, and your life align? And will you begin to experience a faith that is alive, that costs, and that, in the end, transforms every part of you? When Jesus knelt in Gethsemane, his sweat became like drops of blood. Yet even in the face of terror, he whispered, "Not my will, but yours be done." And that single sentence, spoken in quiet surrender, shattered the comfort of heaven and invited the full weight of earthly agony upon him. A moment that was not weakness but the highest act of love, the ultimate expression of obedience and intimacy with the Father. Imagine the creator of galaxies, the one whose voice commands stars into motion, willingly choosing sorrow, so that you might know peace, the weight of every sin, every failure, every hidden rebellion that humanity would commit pressed upon him in that dim, shadowy garden. And there, before nails were hammered into flesh, before the mockery and derision of men, before the excruciating agony of crucifixion, the battle for your soul was already underway. For the victory was secured the moment he surrendered. And if the Son of God himself needed to yield his perfect will to the Father, how much more must we? How desperately we need to learn the same humility, the same trust. Yet so often we pray for guidance while clutching tightly to our own plans. We beg for blessing, yet resist the narrow road. We call on the Lord, yet retreat from the cost of obedience. There is a gentleness in the way Jesus calls us forward, a patience and tenderness that invites us to follow, yet do not mistake it for softness. His love is not sentimental. It is strong, unyielding, capable of stripping away every illusion of independence, every false sense of security, every idol we hold in our hearts. He does not invite you into misery. He invites you into maturity, a faith that is not swayed by circumstance or emotion, but anchored in surrender. Every time you whisper, "Your will be done," you are declaring war on your own pride. Every yes spoken over fear, every choice made in obedience, even when it costs, even when it humbles, is a small crucifixion of the self. You are choosing a harder path, yes, but it is also a holier one. For the greatest freedom you will ever know is found not in self-expression or personal comfort, but in self-abandonment, in the yielding of your will, your preferences, your control. It is the paradox of God's kingdom that the more you surrender, the more alive you become, the more your soul soars even as the world would see you diminished. Look at the cross again, not as a relic of the past, not as decoration on a wall, but as a living reminder that obedience often looks like defeat before it reveals victory. When Christ was lifted upon that wood, it appeared to the world as failure, yet it was the greatest triumph the universe had ever seen. He did not cling to comfort. He did not attempt escape. He transformed suffering into salvation, pain into purpose, agony into glory. And so too will you discover that what you lay down in obedience will not be lost, but redeemed. The fears you release, the ambitions you surrender, the idols you abandon are not destroyed in vain. They are purified, redirected, transformed into vessels for the Spirit. Trust Him with your future. He who gave everything for your salvation will not mishandle your surrender. The same God who endured betrayal, torture, and death now whispers to your heart, guiding your choices, strengthening your resolve, asking only that you follow, that you walk the path of daily obedience, that you learn to yield before the pressure, to submit before the cost becomes too high. There is power in yielding, strength in surrender, and every act of obedience, however small, is a victory over the tyranny of self. Every prayer spoken with real submission, every habit relinquished, every fear cast down is a step closer to the freedom Jesus purchased for you with His blood. Remember that the garden was not the end, but the beginning. Gethsemane was the place where surrender became the gateway to victory, the place where the Son of God demonstrated that yielding to the Father is the first act of true courage, and that courage carries the power to transform the ordinary life of a believer into a life marked by holiness, influence, and eternal significance. When you surrender your agenda, your control, your desire to manipulate outcomes, when you yield in relationships, finances, ambitions, or comfort. You are stepping into the same spiritual principle that Christ modeled: obedience before ease, surrender before preference, trust before understanding. And it is here, in these moments of letting go, that the Spirit moves most powerfully, shaping your character, aligning your will, and preparing you for the eternal purposes God has planned. So do not shrink from the surrender that seems small or insignificant. Do not underestimate the acts of yielding that appear private and unnoticed. Every yes that defies your own will, every choice that favors God's plan over your comfort, every step taken on the narrow path is a seed planted in eternity. And as you learn to say, "Your will be done," over and over in prayer, in decision-making, in the mundane and difficult moments of daily life, you are cultivating a heart that is more like Christ's, a spirit trained in humility, a soul anchored in the kingdom, the same kingdom where the cross turned death into life, weakness into strength, sorrow into joy, and fear into courage. The principle is simple yet profound. Surrender precedes victory. Yielding precedes freedom. Obedience precedes blessing. And when you embrace this, when you truly practice "your will be done," you find a depth of peace and joy that the world cannot offer, a stability that no circumstance can shake, a life lived not under the tyranny of fear or self-interest, but under the guidance and love of the one who knows the end from the beginning. So let the words of Gethsemane echo in your heart. Let the example of Jesus guide your steps. Let surrender become your daily practice, your whispered prayer, your deliberate choice. And in doing so, you will discover that the path of obedience, though narrow and sometimes steep, is the path that leads to life, transformation, and eternal joy. For in yielding to God's will, in laying down what you would cling to, in embracing the cost of obedience, you are joining Christ in the greatest act of love ever known. The act that purchased your freedom, redeemed your soul, and opened the way to eternal communion with the Father. Trust Him, follow Him, and let every act of surrender remind you that His power is made perfect in your weakness, that your laying down becomes His lifting up, and that the life of true faith, rooted in obedience and anchored in surrender, is the life that will endure, the life that bears fruit, the life that glorifies God forever. There is a holy paradox at the heart of Christianity, a principle so counterintuitive that it seems almost impossible to grasp fully, yet it lies at the center of every transformative walk with Christ. The more you die, the more you live. And this is not merely poetic or abstract. It is practical. It is the law of the kingdom. When Jesus tells us to carry our cross, He is not assigning us to a life of endless grief or despair. He is inviting us into a rhythm of surrender where joy emerges not despite hardship, but through it in His kingdom. Surrender is the doorway to strength. Loss becomes the seed of eternal gain. And the paradox is that what appears as defeat in this world often conceals the victory of heaven. The disciples themselves did not understand this at first. They fled when the sword flashed in Gethsemane. They trembled behind locked doors while their master, the Son of God, bled upon the unforgiving wood of the cross. They wrestled with fear, confusion, and grief. Yet when the risen Christ appeared to them, scars still visible, yet death defeated, their trembling turned to flame, their despair to courage, their confusion to clarity. And in that moment, they finally grasped what he had been teaching all along, that the cross is both an altar and a victory banner. It is painful, yet powerful, humiliating, yet holy. And so too will your obedience often feel like a death before it becomes a resurrection. The burdens you bear, the sacrifices you make, the losses you endure, all serve to strip away what is fleeting and reveal what is eternal. Some of you have carried burdens thinking they were punishments, when in truth they were invitations into deeper fellowship with Christ. You were not being abandoned. You were being refined. You were not losing. You were learning how to live for things unseen. The invisible kingdom that governs life with eternal principles. This is why Jesus said, if you try to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose it for my sake, you will find it. To carry your cross, therefore, is to walk against the grain of this world, to embrace paths that the world avoids, to choose obedience over convenience, humility over pride, faith over fear. It is to move through life with quiet confidence that heaven sees what earth overlooks. Your sacrifices are not wasted. Your tears are not unnoticed. Every moment of surrender, every act of self-denial, every prayer spoken in weakness is recorded and honored by the God who sees and rewards the heart. And one day, when the veil is lifted, you will look back and realize that the moments you thought would break you actually built you into someone more resilient, more compassionate, more attuned to eternity than comfort ever could. The cross you carry now, though heavy and demanding, is shaping you for a crown you will one day wear. It is training you to endure, to persevere, to love, to trust, to reflect the character of Christ. The life you live in obedience, however small it may seem, is producing a fruit that will last beyond the temporal applause of men. So take courage. Continue to follow, even when your steps feel heavy, even when the road is steep, even when the world questions, mocks, or misunderstands. For the one who gave everything for you walks beside you still. His voice has not changed. His invitation remains the same. Follow me. And to follow him is not merely to imitate, but to participate, to step into the rhythm of his life, to surrender each day afresh, to die to self repeatedly, so that resurrection life can emerge. Remember that the cross is not just an event in history. It is a living principle, a present reality that shapes the moment-to-moment choices of those who will truly follow. And every time you say yes to obedience, Every time you lay down what the world esteems for the sake of what God values, you are aligning your life with eternity. And there is a hidden joy in that alignment, a joy that is not dependent on circumstances, a peace that surpasses understanding, a hope that refuses to be shaken by trials. The paradox is constant. The more you die to pride, the more humility you gain, the more you surrender control, the more freedom you experience. The more you bear hardship willingly, the more strength is formed in your character. It is the law of God's kingdom that life is found through loss, strength through surrender, victory through obedience. Do not despise the cross. Do not resent the weight. Do not compare your journey to the ease of others, for the value is in the alignment, in the process, in the daily decision to trust Him, to follow Him, to obey Him, even when your instincts scream for comfort, even when your emotions plead for escape, even when your desires argue for delay. Every yes spoken in these moments, every act of faith and obedience, is a brick laid in the foundation of a life that will endure beyond the fleeting years of this earth. So lift your eyes, look again at the cross, see in it the ultimate example of surrender. See in it the pathway from suffering to glory. See in it the proof that obedience, though costly, yields life. That loss, though painful, produces gain. That humility, though humbling, establishes a soul prepared for eternal reward. Do not shrink from the call. Do not postpone the surrender. Do not whisper maybe later. Respond now with a heart ready to follow, to carry your cross daily, to embrace the paradox that the more you die, the more you truly live. And in that daily death to self, in that daily yielding, in that constant whisper, your will be done, you will discover a life richer, deeper, and more beautiful than anything the world could offer. For the one who walked the path of suffering and obedience, who conquered death and secured eternal life, is walking with you, calling you onward, saying the same words that echo through eternity, "Follow me." And in following Him, carrying your cross, surrendering your heart, trusting your steps, you step into the very life and victory He has promised, a life that transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary, the painful into the holy, and the surrendered into the truly free.